As Emmett was saying, my name is Mark Anderson, and excuse me for a minute. Take this off. For the past year, myself and my family have been going through Scotland trying to find some really quite astonishing evidence of paranormal phenomenon within Scottish castles and palaces. Now, I was asked to do this talk by Alison, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak. I know how much this conference and SPI mean to Alison and to Ron, and especially when you've got people like Malcolm and Ron speaking, it's a real honour to be able to share the stage as well. And the reason why I'm going to speak about these properties in particular, I'm trying to find properties that really haven't been on the map as much as Stirling Castle or Edinburgh Castle, although I will mention them a few times in the speech. Now, what we did is, my son James, who's in the audience, and Michael, the younger one, we'd go around castles all over Scotland and try and find out from people what sort of accounts they've got of the paranormal. Now, there were a few complaints, mainly by James, who was missing the Xbox, and my 2-year-old son. There was a couple of complaints about missing Peppa Pig, but that was from me. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about, and it's actually a question that came from Alison's podcast when I did it in October, is why is it that castles and palaces seem to be as haunted as they are? And when Alison asked me that question, I really didn't know what the answer was. And for the past year, I've been thinking about it as well. And there's a lot of theories. There's a few other theories as well that I haven't mentioned on the slide. And I'm not overly fond of any of them. But I did come across a gentleman called David Cowan and his work. David Cowan is a believer in energy lines called leylines. And while I'm sure that most people in the audience will know what leylines are, for people that don't, imagine a river, but instead of it being water, it's actually energy, and specifically earth energy. What I really liked about this theory is two things. Firstly, it seems that on particularly powerful leylines, castles and palaces seem to be deliberately being put on these areas. It's not just castles and palaces, it's also hill forts and other places of strategic significance. It even goes on to this day. The Scottish Parliament is between two volcanic plugs. Volcanic plugs are almost like lakes of where the energy or where ley lines start from. It seems to be the source. What is really interesting as well about volcanic plugs is that the two most strategically important castles, and just both of them were mentioned in the last talk, are both on volcanic plugs. That's Stirling Castle and Edinburgh Castle. Both of them also have paranormal activity within their walls. David's done a lot of work around ley lines in the Perthshire area. And as you can see, there's a number of castles that actually seem to fit on ley lines. This is only in Perthshire alone, and from some of the research I've seen, there's some castles that have got quite astounding paranormal activity. It's been a real labour of love, and I've really enjoyed doing this talk. But there's one thing I also found about was not only was ley lines being connected to castles, they also have a real connection to the paranormal. According to many people who believe in earth energies and ley lines, there seems to be an awful lot of coincidences or an awful lot of occurrences of ghosts, paranormal, poltergeists, demons, UFOs, and even time slips. David Cowan, the gentleman who actually developed this picture, actually had a time slip himself when he was actually researching for his latest book. This, for me, is a very strong theory on why castles and palaces seem to be as haunted as they are. However, I will say it is pseudoscience according to skeptics, and many of them actually don't believe in the existence of ley lines. They believe that ley lines and the fact that so many standing stones are on such a straight line is nothing more than a mere coincidence. I myself am a believer, and some, especially around the Perthshire area, although it's not mentioned on this slide, is McGurney Castle. David was doing some work in McGurney Castle. Again, it has some haunted, it has some paranormal and ghost stories in it, but David was actually doing dowsing, which is how he's able to detect ley lines. He was able to detect particularly a tunnel, and the tunnel leads between McGurney Castle's the dungeon and the river. At one point though, he couldn't actually find the tunnel, even though there's no, he couldn't find the tunnel using the dowsing rods, and later he found out because the tunnel had collapsed. For me, it suggests that if he's able to detect tunnels without any sort of indication bar the dowsing rods, then he certainly has the ability to detect other things such as ley lines and even water, which sometimes dowsers use. It's used a lot in archaeology by archaeologists and even plumbers. Ron Halliday has even been asked by universities to find water on their grounds by some universities. During the research for this talk, what I noticed from a lot of the literature was a number of ghost stories happening over and over again. Probably the most famous one is that of a ghost of a lady, maybe a green lady or a white lady. Other more common accounts are also animals, the devil, and occasionally musicians as well. According to quite a very good book actually by a gentleman called Martin Coventry, he has put a percentage of how many ghosts are actually and what sort of colours they are. The most common, he claims, is the green lady. The green lady occurs about 25% of the time in all accounts of female ghosts. Other, more just slightly less common, is the white or the grey lady. And according to Martin Coventry at least, he believes that as time goes on, green ladies seem to lose their colour and become greyish or white. Eventually they'll maybe even lose their ability to be seen at all and just become a mere presence. There's a few other colours that Mr. Coventry talks about in his book: a green lady, a blue lady, and a brown lady. The green lady seems to have some sort of connection to Celtic connections, while the brown lady will maybe have a connection to maybe Polynesian or Asian descent. Well, I'm not very sure what sort of descent from blue or pink ladies. One particular example of a pink lady is in Stirling Castle. Stirling Castle has two ghosts, one of a pink lady and another of a green lady. However, when I was doing the research on and doing my visits and jaunts all over Scotland, probably the most famous of all green lady stories is that of Culross Castle. Culross Castle is in Aberdeenshire, and it was actually given to the Burnett family after the Wars of Independence by Robert the Bruce. The family lived there for a long time in a crannock in the middle of the lake, and in the 16th century they actually moved into Culross Castle. Eventually, in 1951, the family gave the castle to the National Trust for Scotland. When myself and my family actually spent 2 nights at Culross on Halloween last year, and while we were there, any of the employees that we spoke to, none of them actually seemed to have any accounts of paranormal phenomenon. But the story though of Culross Castle is that of either a servant or a ward who became pregnant. The belief is that the woman was murdered and her ghost is seen in the 3rd floor of the tower in a room that's now called the Green Lady's Room. The story and the account is that the lady is seen pick up a baby next to the fireplace before disappearing. What's really interesting as well about this story is it's been witnessed numerous times. The most famous of the witnesses was Queen Victoria herself. Also, furthermore, there was actually accounts when the workmen came in and worked on in the room, they actually found bones of a lady and a child in the walls of the Green Lady's room. Again, while I never found any accounts first hand from any of the employees, I was actually looking at I think it's from the Scotsman, and they actually published this picture. This is actually in Crathis, and according to this family who were visiting Crathis for the day, they actually reported this sighting here, which they claimed to be that of a ghostly presence. When interviewed, the property manager, a guy called James Henderson, gave this quote. I'm just going to go over here so I can read it. There have been a number of mysterious sightings in and around the castle of late. In particular, around Halloween, the castle guides have reported that things have felt strange. They have reported a chill down the back in an otherwise warm room, odd noises in an otherwise empty building. The next type of ghost that seems to happen over and over again is that of animals. And yeah, this one isn't so scary. Although what is scary is one thing that was put in the paranormal database was that of a haunted mole. Naturally, I was terrified when I heard that story. Some of the more frequent accounts are that of large black dogs. Now, while Pollock House, for example, is well known for Janet Douglas, and who eventually went to Salem and was responsible for accusing many of the witches in the Salem witch trial, Pollock House also has a number of other ghost stories, including that of a large black dog with glowing red eyes in the estate. In Broddock Castle in Arran, there's the tale of a white stag who's seen just before the death of the chief of the Clan Hamilton. There's another few ghosts around of a lion, and there's quite a few places of monkeys, which is actually not really that uncommon because they would have been taken back as pets of something unusual to be admired. Drumlannoc's got a monkey, and one thing I haven't put in this slide is also a castle called Brockhall Castle as well. One place in particular, and I got myself in trouble for this, was Culross Palace in Fife. Now, Culross Palace, in particular, the guest bedroom, has three distinct types of ghosts. It has a ghost of a monkey, a man dressed in leather, and a strong smell of alcohol. The problem about it, though, is that when I went to Culross for the second time, I'd actually known this story, and I walked past a group of tourists who were there for the Outlander convention, and unfortunately I was on the wife, shouted really loudly, "I can't wait to get into the bedroom, there's a man with a leather, dressed in leather, who's got a really big monkey." And I got a few dirty looks that day, I can assure you. However, probably a little place that isn't on the map as much is this of Greenbank Garden. This is a couple of pictures that I took, and you can see as well, I'm an expert cameraman. This is actually in Greenbank Garden itself. And again, there's been a number of cases of phantom dogs. And again, like what Malcolm said, it's only seemed to appear to certain people. According to, excuse me, I've just got my notes for a second. For this quote. According to the NTS, there's actually 4 ghosts that are actually in the estate, and one of them was actually witnessed by a woman quite regularly who used to walk around the estate. The lady said that she used to see a large black dog. One day though, she was actually walking with her husband, and her husband, although it was in plain sight, couldn't see the dog. Apparently she went for a strong cup of tea because she was traumatised. However, Greenbank also has a number of ghost stories as well associated with it. Again, from the property manager, we have 4 ghosts that we know of in Greenbank. There's a lady in a red criminal dress. We've had 3 independent reports of this lady. People who were visitors in the house that we took, people people who were visitors in the house before we took it over, one of whom visited on an open doors day with her friend. Her friend went through the house, but the visitor refused to come back. On another account, as well from Greenbank, which isn't as well known, is that an NTS gardener actually saw the spirit of a little girl who had died in the 20th century. There was actually a confirmed report of this girl dying, and he witnessed it in the garden during his daily routine. The next type of legend that comes over and over again is that of the devil. And one thing I'd have to say, that any of the accounts that I actually heard, I never saw, and nobody ever said anything about demonic or some sort of evil activity. Probably the most famous of all the castles for being associated with the devil is that of Glamis Castle in Angus. Glamis Castle has got the story of Errol Beardy, who played cards with the devil on the Sabbath day and was sent to hell. But again, it's got other ghost stories as well in the castle itself. There's also the story of the deformed child, and apparently the 13th Earl of Glamis actually said, if you actually knew the story of that, you'd go down to your knees and pray in thanks to God, for it wasn't your story to tell. Another place that's supposed to be haunted is Androssan Castle. This has actually again got two ghost stories. Firstly, the ghost of William Wallace is supposed to be there, and the second is that of the Earl, who actually got a magical horse bridle in exchange for his soul. However, he was able to win the bridle back from the devil, and out of fury, the devil attacked the castle and left a footprint in the castle rocks. However, of all the stories and all the places that I've heard with the devil, probably the most famous, probably my most favourite one, is that of House of the Bins in West Lothian. Myself and my family have visited there numerous times, and we really love it because it's got a fantastic view over the Forth. Here is Michael, and on the backdrop is House of the Bins. And it was owned by the Dial family until about 1945. The Dial family still live in the castle to this day. The NTS have got an agreement, though they own it, the Dial family can live there for as long as they want. There's two Tam Dials. There was an MP who unfortunately died a couple of years ago, but his most famous forefather is that of General Tam Dial. General Tam Dial was considered a monster. He was a staunch royalist who fought against the Cromwellian forces and was imprisoned in the Tower of London. He miraculously escaped and headed to Russia, where he became a general in the Russian army. He fought in the Russian-Ottoman War and was notorious for apparently roasting his victims alive. After the war, he came back to Scotland and again assumed military duties. This time in Scotland, he fought at the Battle of, I can't see notes here, the Ruling Green, where he fought against the Covenanters. After he defeated the Covenanters, he took the prisoners to Greyfriars Kirk in Edinburgh. One of the most famous places in Scotland known for being haunted is that of Greyfriars Kirk, and especially where the Covenanters were held prison. He was the man who actually was responsible for imprisoning the Covenanters there. The stories about the supernatural and Tam Dial, there's been a couple of them. Apparently he has been seen riding a horse in the estate. Also, when people apparently said that he was shot with bullets, the bullets would simply bounce off him. But the most famous story about Tam Dial is that of him playing cards with the devil. Again, like the story in Glamis Castle, he would play against the devil and always lose. But one day he actually beat the devil, and out of anger, the devil picked up a marble table and threw it out the window. It landed in a small pond, and many years later, I think it was in the 18th century, so probably about 200 years later, the pond was actually drained. At the bottom of the pond, they did indeed find a marble table, which is still in the House of the Bins to this day. The last type of legend I'd like to talk about is musicians. There's, again, like the devil and green ladies, they come up over and over again. And if I'm going to be frank, I don't believe in all the legends when it comes to the devil or musicians, unfortunately. The most common myth is that of a piper, although in Edinburgh Castle there's also a ghost of a drummer, and in House of the Dun near Montrose there is a flute player. Interestingly as well, Edinburgh Castle is also known for having a phantom dog in it as well. Now, the reason why I'm not really a big fan of the Piper myth is for quite a good reason, but I'll just tell you about it in a second. In Culzean Castle, it is believed that a piper with his dog went into the caves to prove that they weren't haunted. The music got fainter and fainter and fainter, but then after a while, people grew concerned and actually looked for the piper. They couldn't find him, and eventually a search party was sent in to actually find the piper, but he wasn't found. Eventually, however, though, according to the ghost story, when the Kennedy family are about to get married, he appears again on the eve of the marriage and plays his pipes. There's also a piper's bray in Culzean Castle. We visited Culzean Castle twice for this talk, and we love the castle. Not only has it got the caves, it also has a massive garden complex, and it's an extremely beautiful place, and I don't think you could cover all of it in one day. The gardens are, as you can see here, quite beautiful. And over and above that, they've got an amazing play area for me, actually, not the children. However, there is a lot of paranormal activity associated with the castle. The castle is actually well known for being haunted. And just before I talk about it, the reason why I don't like the piper and the dog theory is that it doesn't happen just in one place. It also happens in a number of places. Allegedly, Arthur Street, Culross Palace, places in Orkney. There's about 7 different places that still have the same legend, that of a piper and his dog going into a town and disappearing. However, there does seem to be genuine paranormal phenomenon within Culzean Castle. So much so, it's not just most haunted that have been there. The NTS have actually even written an article on, and it's actually visible on their website, to actually document some of the cases that people have actually seen. The most haunted room in Culzean Castle is that of the state room, and there's been reports of greyish and black shadow figures actually floating about. Near the kitchen is also been a ghost of a little girl that has again been seen running about the corridors. But the place that really interests me is the oval staircase. The oval staircase was the masterpiece of the castle and was developed by Robert Adam. And there's a number of paranormal phenomena associated with the oval staircase. On one account, a cleaner actually saw a lady in a long dress with according to her anyway, with like a hazy mass actually seen floating around the gallery. Another cleaner, who was unknown to the First Lady, actually felt her apron being pulled while she was doing her daily tasks. However, there's one particular place in the oval staircase that is really, really interesting, and that is the painting of Margaret Erskine of Dun. Margaret Erskine of Dun's painting, apparently a mist has been seen there quite often, and it seems to float from one end of the castle to the other, one end of the staircase to the other. People felt that there's a lot of paranormal phenomenon associated with the painting itself. While I don't know if that's the case or not, I do think that is a really interesting place. The one thing as well about Culzean Castle is the builder and the architect. The architect was, again as I said, Robert Adam, and Robert Adam had a specific style of building. He developed it called the Adam style with him and his brother, and became an international success. It came over to America when it became the federal style, and the most prominent examples of the federal style are actually found in Salem, Massachusetts. Furthermore, it's also some of the state houses in Boston have also got the same type of style, that sort of federal style, which is based heavily on the Adam style. In Russia, the Adam style then went over and became part of, it was actually taken by Adam's protege, Charles Cameron, who then took it and used it in some of the greatest palaces in Russia, and apparently it's still there to this day. But this was only one small part of a very great time for Scotland. It was when Adam and his people like Charles Cameron were actually being famous for architecture. Scotland was having a number of scientific and intellectual achievements in philosophy, medicine, art and literature. There was numerous, and there were so many types of achievement in many different areas that actually people believe that Scotland actually may not have even actually changed the world for the better. According to some historians, it actually may have created the modern world in the way that we know it. What I find that's really interesting about this is that places like Culzean are still a testament to that time when we actually really did revolutionise the world. Now, a couple of the places I'm going to speak about just before, I'm going to have a couple of honourable mentions just before I go into some of the real accounts. In Perthshire, there is near Aberfeldy, there's a place called Menzies Castles, and again, the paranormal phenomenon associated with that place is fantastic. A paranormal investigator called David Barrett has investigated it several times and reported at one particular instance that he actually asked the EVP to give the names of the portraits in the gallery, and every single time he was given the right answer. Again, according to Lynn over there, who's doing the stall, Lynn reported on one account that an orb appeared right in front of 40 people and dashed in the hall. A few days later, the same thing happened again in front of a smaller group. The reason why I haven't added this in is because I hadn't actually visited Castle Menzies, and I didn't really have time to make arrangements to see it. All the places bar one I've been to, and the one place I didn't make, I tried to get to 3 times and always had some sort of issue come up. The first place I'd like to speak about is House of Dun in Montrose. Again, it's not very well known, and it was actually built by William Adam. His son was Robert Adam, who created Culzean, and William Adam was obsessed with symmetry. In the house itself, he actually put in fake doors just to keep a symmetrical value. And this family was owned by the Erskine family. Well, another thing I'd have to say just about the house is that nearby, the National Trust for Scotland actually own a nature base as well. So not only do they look after a number of properties, they also look after a number of really important environmental habitats around Scotland. One of the first tales is that of Helena Erskine. Now, one thing, it doesn't really appear very well on this slide, but you can see the photographs and the people actually in there. It's all the same person. What had actually happened was the Erskine family had brought in an artist, and the artist had drawn the bodies of the family members. However, the next day, all the family members went out, so he asked one of the butlers to actually stand in and actually drew the man's face over on a lady's body. However, this lady and man is Helen Erskine, and Helen Erskine wasn't going to inherit the House of Dun. It was actually going to go to another family members. She was really wanting to get this property, and Herself and her siblings went to Forfar and met a witch. They received a poison from the witch and actually gave it to John Erskine, who was actually the heir to the House of Dun. And apparently John Erskine suffered a really, really horrible death. His brother survived and actually became the new lord of the House of Dun. In the library, although this picture actually hasn't been taken in the library, I didn't actually know there was any paranormal phenomenon in the library until the lady who was actually on the tour told me about 20 minutes later. This is actually in the library itself, and it's William Adams' original design of the house. And about 2 years ago, the lady who was taking the tour actually saw two men in reenactment soldier uniforms. She walked in after them when she saw them going to the library, but by the time she got there, they were gone. While this room wasn't reported to be haunted, this is actually a statue that was like a mannequin that was given to the children. Whenever they were bored or lonely, they were encouraged to actually go and stare at that statue for hours on end. And I can assure you, the place was really, really freaky. Probably the place that had the most paranormal phenomenon is that of the servants' corridor. There were reports of an old maid that was actually seen at the very end of this corridor, and as you can see there's a bit of light there as well. That's actually because there's a stairwell. At the stairwell there was actually been again footsteps and again reports of seeing the maid. It's so freaky in fact, the lady who actually took the tour was saying to me that when she actually has to open up the house in the morning, she has to put her headphones on because there's so many times there's been phantom footsteps, it just really scares her, and she puts the headphones in to drown the noise out. One thing I'd have to say as well is I could have murdered my son when I was there. At the other end of the corridor, there's a lot of bells, and there's a strict no touching policy in House of Dun. The next minute, what do I see? I hear a ding, 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 ding. My son had actually perked up on his tiptoes and actually was ringing one of the bells. And then when I actually told he wasn't not to touch, he actually blamed it on this really old man who had a walking stick and could barely stand up straight. The most interesting place within the House of Dun, though, had to be that of the nursery and the nanny's room. This place was really, really, even walking into it, felt really bizarre. You could see some of the toys that the children had to play with were not the nicest. And in the nanny's room, again, numerous NTS staff have actually reported hearing cries, people crying. When they've actually walked into the rooms, they've actually seen nobody there. This room is, again, this has been taken from the nursery room and into the nanny's room. And again, there's been crying and other sort of paranormal phenomenon. The paranormal phenomenon got so much that actually the NTS had to take action. The door there was kept on locking itself from the inside. Now, there's no way in apart from that door. Although there's windows, the windows have got metal bars on them because the Erskine family's children were at risk of being taken hostage because they were a very rich family. Over and over again, the MTS went in and found that the door had locked itself from the inside. Without any explanation, it got so common, they actually removed the lock from the door. The next place I'm going to talk about is Culross. Now, the last speaker was talking about St Mungo. St Mungo was actually born in Culross, and there is so much paranormal phenomenon, you could have an entire conference just about this one place. It was built by George Bruce and started construction in 1597 and finished in 1611. George Bruce was a genius who made his money from coal mining and salt panning. He was the world's first miner to actually mine underwater. And what he did is, he developed an artificial island in the middle of the River Forth, and then actually used that as a sort of ventilation system for the miners underwater, or underneath the water, not actually in the water. It was considered an absolute achievement of engineering. People would come from all over the world just to see this artificial island and to see the underwater mining operation. At one point, even James VI came to see it, and one of these rooms here, I think it's this one here, is actually even called the King's Room. When the King went to actually see the underwater mining operation, he actually saw the water flooding in all around him, and actually thought that George Bush was trying to kill him. But he was actually then calmed down, and then apparently enjoyed the rest of his tour. After George Bush had passed away, it went to John Erskine. This isn't the same branch of Erskines that were found in House of Dun, it's a different branch. And John Erskine was a colourful individual. He was a colonel who fought for William of Orange in Ireland, and when he came back and went back home, he was also allegedly a cross-dresser as well. He would like to dress in women's clothing and used to have quite a lot of parties involving a lot of men. A lot of the paranormal phenomenon within Culross Palace, just in the palace alone, is absolutely outstanding. This is the Hall of Culross, and there's been a number of different accounts from NTS employees and from visitors. There's been cases where cold spots have happened. When there have actually been investigations happen, then the temperature has gone down from 16 degrees down to 6 in a matter of minutes. On the table there's been wicker baskets actually moved by themselves, and people have reported having small pebbles being thrown at them as well. Colonel Erskine was also responsible for putting a partition in the hall and making a small withdrawing room for the ladies. And again, there's been numerous sightings in that room. Apparently, people have witnessed a ghost called Alistair who wears a grey wig. One of the more interesting places as well is a safe. This is actually taken from the Lairds room looking into the safe, and again, according to staff, they've actually reported shadow men in the Lairds room. The Lairds room, the safe is actually deliberately given a very small passage, and that's so that nobody can actually draw out a sword and attack anybody who's in the safe. And there's been a number of paranormal phenomena that in just that room in particular. Probably the most interesting one was that of two quills that apparently were dancing within the quill holder. And I think it was a 5-year-old boy was actually walked into the safe. There was actually a no entry sign, and was speaking to a man. He was seen laughing and joking and even speaking to somebody, although there was nobody there. When asked who it was, he said it was a nice man wearing the funny clothes. Now, they hadn't visited this room yet, but when they was actually asked later on, he said it was that man there I was speaking to. He was actually speaking to George Bruce, who lived, again, in the 17th century. The painted ceiling room is, again, been a lot of paranormal phenomenon. One thing that's also scary is I've also misspelled musketeer and missed it. There's been 2 accounts of a female ghost. One by a New Zealand backpacker and another by a gentleman who was on a paranormal investigation and actually heard somebody's name of Edith. According to the property manager at Culross, apparently it was a lady who died in 1903 called Edith. Apparently she lost a child, and according to psychics anyway, this is actually the person who people actually reported of seeing. Another strange anomaly is that people have been smelling the smell of bread, even though there's no bakery nearby. And even if the nearest bakery the wind was blowing the other way, making it very, very unlikely that bread was actually coming from a more conventional source. Now, again, this is actually the north wing, and it holds a number of rooms. There's the Laird's room, there's the King's room, and I can't remember the other room. However, there has been a great deal of, a lot of paranormal phenomenon within this one building. The manager again, Linda Whiteford, when she was actually in the North Wing, she actually said thank you to Colonel John Erskine. She asked for a knock, and she actually heard in her ear somebody say, "You're welcome." The ghosts seem to be frequently observed by men, and of all the places that I went to, this is probably one place that I actually genuinely did feel that I could sense something. One thing that didn't happen to me, was a man actually felt heavy breathing and he got his bum pinched. What I was really annoyed by is that I'd been doing squats that day and it still never happened to me. There was also a gentleman who was actually, although it says filming crew, that's actually not right. It was actually a gentleman from Radio Scotland. And while he was actually recording something for Culross, he actually said he felt he was prodded. He was actually recording while it happened. And I'd like to actually hear that recording to see what he was saying. Culross is an amazing place. Not only has it just had these sightings I've just told you about that maybe a year or so old, but I actually speak to Linda, the lady who runs manages the palace quite often, and she's not saying it happens maybe once a year or once a month. She says it happens almost every week. I spoke to her 2 weeks ago, and she was saying that there's been multiple witnesses actually seen scones being thrown at one woman who was a waitress there. There's also been sightings of a tall man and an old woman in the shawl in the cafe right next to the palace. Furthermore, in the townhouse, again there's been more paranormal sightings, and this is just again in the past 2 weeks. One of the employees again actually saw when the doors actually opened by itself. And when I spoke to Linda just a few days ago, she said that her manager was actually in the palace by himself, and he could hear footsteps actually walking, even though he was the only one there. Culross is a fantastic place. It's got so much history in it, and it's, again, while I can go on forever, I'm just going to leave it at that. But I really do think that this place really warrants far more investigation. The next place I'm going to talk about is Drum Castle. And again, it's not as well known as Edinburgh or Stirling. It was owned by the Irving family, who owned it until about 1975. The Irving family were again given the lands by Robert the Bruce after the wars of independence. Again, when we visited Crattis, this is only 5 miles away from Crattis. So myself and the family went down and actually visited the place. What was really amazing is when I spoke to the lady, just the amount of activity she was reporting. She actually was genuinely terrified of the place, if I'm honest with you. A little bit about the history of Drum Castle. Again, it was one of the oldest tower houses still standing to this day. It's got a fantastic woodland, and it's got a really, really beautiful gardens as well. There's also a chapel there, and although I didn't visit it, and I don't know if there's any ghost stories behind it, the chapel is very nearby the castle, just in kind of that direction. And the lady who I was speaking to just said it was phenomenally haunted. So some of the accounts basically, according to NTS staff, something happens almost every week. Many of the staff report seeing a black figure, and they associate this with Anna Forbes, who was actually one of the ladies of the house. The accounts are quite terrifying. At one time, the lady actually said there was an account where 5 witnesses actually all saw this black figure appear in front of them. On another occasion, she was actually pinned against the wall by some sort of physical force. The staff actually say that of all the rooms that they're most afraid of, it's actually the nursery that generates the most fear. In one account, I believe in May last year, a 6'2", really large Norwegian man actually went into the nursery with his wife, who was 7 months pregnant at the time. When he actually walked in, he felt himself being actually pinned against the wall, much like the staff member. Furthermore, the lady's unborn child actually started to go berserk inside her womb. In other occasions as well within the nursery, there's been an 8-year-old boy who reported seeing a woman dressed in black, even though when it was actually pointed to her, his mother couldn't see it. And again, there's been frequent cold spots over and over again within the nursery. When I was actually looking at some of the accounts by NTS staff, they were also reporting people having really quite horrible, putrid, disgusting smells. And there's also been accounts of children even laughing nearby. But one thing that's, again, another sort of physical evidence is the fact that there's been a lot of times where NTS staff would actually go in and they would flatten out the bed covers and then lock up the palace or the castle for the night, come back the next day, and the beds have actually been, the sheets have been ruffled like somebody's been sleeping in them, even though there was nobody else in the castle. This has happened on frequent occasions. The last thing I'd like to say is about a guy, the same lady actually who was pinned against the wall. After she was pinned against the wall, she went back and there was a feather right on her laptop keyboard. Now, the one other place that I'd like to talk about is probably the most, this is probably, I've left the best to last. This is Culzean. And again, it's not actually a castle or a palace, but it is an ex-POW camp. It's in Perthshire, and Lynn Knight and her husband Gary run a tour there every Wednesday. Now, while I've never been on the tour myself, what I will say is my paranormal investigation team say that this is the best spot they have ever visited. I've also, Lynn has been absolutely fantastic and given a lot of accounts. What is really impressive is some of the collaboration that goes with it. Another paranormal investigator, I just told Lynn this story about an hour ago, actually reported seeing Roman centurions. I actually had to say to that investigator, that's because there's a Roman camp nearby. Again, according to a lot of people that have been there, they've actually had intelligence responses on EVPs. They've had noticeable paranormal activity, especially when they're speaking in German or singing the song Silent Night, which again comes from a German background. There's been large coal scuttles that are extremely heavy being moved from one of the huts to another. The huts there are actually really quite big. And again, there's been lots of accounts where people have felt being prodded or pulled. But there's one particular incident that is just absolutely mind-blowing. And that was something Lynn had told me about, and I got some amazing amazing confirmation from another source. Lynn said that almost all the time you'd get an ex-military man walk in and say, I don't believe in ghosts, but, I don't believe in ghosts, but, over and over again. One man came in and said to her, I don't believe in ghosts, but I had a dream one night while I was in one of the huts. He dreamt that a soldier with a clipboard and a gun and a peaked hat walked into the hut and was actually wandering about bed to bed. He then said that he was actually thinking he was dreaming and thought nothing of it until he woke up the next day and found out that everybody in the same hut, and there was about 12 of them, all had the same dream. But it gets even more interesting than that. When my team went to investigate Culty Bragging, and unfortunately, as I said, I wasn't there myself, the psychic in our team, a lady called Joyce, who's a fantastic psychic, didn't know the story. I actually had to tell her myself, and she reported saying, I sense a man wearing a soldier's uniform, has a gun, a clipboard, and a peaked cap. It was exactly the same account as what was given by that army cadet 20 years ago. They had no link at all, yet they still both reported the same phenomenon. I find that probably one of the best evidences of the paranormal that I've ever heard. I think that's my time up, so I just want to say a couple of thank yous before I leave the stage. A couple of the books that I actually read and I thought were particularly good was Dane Love, Scottish Ghosts, Martin Coventry, and Norman Adams. A big thank you to Linda Whiteford at Culross, Lynn Knight again for all the help she did, and again the NTS. I was an employee of the Trust and left it to take another job. I'm a massive supporter of the Trust. I think they do a fantastic job and they look after a lot of our heritage really well. But there's this one particular person I really like to thank. When I go to a lot of these properties, and we've been to about 30 of them this year, every time while I need to speak to people, he's looked after his little brother. He's looked after him so well that his little brother adores him with like nothing I've ever seen before. And it's my son, James Anderson, who really has done a fantastic job, and I wouldn't have been able to do this talk without him. So I'd like to add to it for everybody, not to give a clap to me, but to James. Thanks very much.